Coming in at number 5, we've got the Magalin Monster. If you've ever taken a drive up the 87, you might have come across a set of very colorful, very large footprints tracked across the highway. While these particular prints were put there by people, they are in homage to the Magalin Monster, aka Arizona's answer to Bigfoot. This big beastie lives along the Magalin Rim and has been seen from Prescott all the way to Clifton. Sightings of the monster date back to early as 1903, with plenty of reports of video, tracks, and hair samples appearing since. People claim that the Magalin Monster is a bipedal humanoid towering over most at 7 feet tall, leaving behind 22-inch footprints. Like most ape-like beasts in the woods, it has crazy strength and some wild eyes. Some claim it's covered in long black hair, others say it's reddish-brown. Maybe it changes with the seasons, or maybe there's more than one. The Magalin Monster is also known for smelling really, really bad. Like dead fish, skunk, BO, peat moss, and snapping turtle musk. I'd hide out in the woods if I smelled like that too. Part of the reason why it's so rarely sighted is that it tends to be active at night. It will hunt and gather all sorts of different foods under cover of darkness and make little nests for itself. If you stumble across one of these pine needle refuges, get the hell out of there. This beefy monster is known to be very territorial and very violent. It reportedly likes to decapitate deer and other wildlife before digging in, and if it can pull the dome off a deer, it can pop your top off like a bottle of Coke. Be careful if you hear any weird noises too, because the Magalin Monster likes to mimic other wildlife. Birds, coyotes, it is even reported to shriek like a woman in distress. So don't go running off to save the damsel, because you might find yourself face to face with a very hairy hunter. Tie up your supplies if you're camping too, as the monster will rummage through stuff left out.
You know, they were all about the hairy man or the wild man or something like that. And of course I didn't believe them.
This, says Wade, is a small baby Bigfoot trying to hide in the corner from his night vision camera.
Coming in at number 4, we've got El Chupacabra. Ah, the Southwest classic. Such a strange creature, the Chupacabra. Is it an alien? A demon dog? Something else? Also known as the goat sucker, these cryptids love to feed on livestock, attacking in the night. Farmers and other animal owners have often found these creatures totally hollowed out following particularly dark nights. Common features of the Chupacabra attacks are a complete lack of blood and puncture wounds in the neck and hindquarters. The wounds are always super clean, no signs of struggle or messiness. Sometimes there are weird injuries too. Cattle often have their anuses cored out, and somehow, even with these brutal injuries, no blood is found. Do the goat suckers inject some sort of sedative? Do they have magical powers? We may never know. One theory is that they have wings and descend on their prey and drain them before they have time to react. This would also explain the lack of tracks that accompany Chupacabra attacks. Although, if they were so quick and clever, wouldn't they also attack humans? Maybe our blood just doesn't taste as good. Now, this legend didn't start in Arizona, but now it's quite prevalent. El Chupacabra seems to have originated in Puerto Rico and made its way into Latin America, eventually spreading to the southwestern states. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find an Arizonan without some sort of Chupacabra story. Tucson resident Billy Nubian claims that he saw one attacking his goats late one night. He was startled awake by the panic sounds of his goats bleeding. Running outside to investigate, he saw a huge rat-like creature pinning one of his goats. It then turned to face Billy, let out a blood-curdling scream, and ran off into the dark. Sarah A. has a similar story where she encountered a half-man, half-ape creature crouching frog-style in her yard. Freaky.
Coming at 3, Fossa Grimmon. Simply known as Grimm, this is a water spirit or troll in Scandinavian folklore. This water spirit plays the fiddle and is described as being exceptionally talented with the sounds of forest, wind and water playing over his fiddle strings. He is a young handsome man who sits naked under waterfalls. What's not to love? Playing mostly the music of nature. Grimm is said to be willing to teach his fiddle skills in exchange for a food offering made on a Thursday evening, and in secrecy. The offerings he accepts is a white goat thrown with head turned away into a waterfall that flows northwards, smoked mutton stolen from the neighbour's storage 4 Thursdays in a row. However, if there is not enough meat on the bone, he will only teach those seeking the skill how to tune the fiddle. What a dick. However, if the offering is satisfactory, he'll take the student's right hand and draw the fingers along the strings until they all bleed. But after that time, the student will be able to play so well that, I quote, "the trees shall dance and torrents in their falls stand still." It is rumoured that Torgeir Orgensen, better known as Millergutten, was a famous fiddle player from Telemark, Norway, who was so good at the fiddle that he was believed to have sold his soul in exchange for Grimm's skills. Coming in at 2, Knockin. Knockin is the Norwegian legend name for a specific type of water spirit, also known as the Knack or the Nika. The Knockin are supposedly able to shapeshift, but are more commonly known as male water spirits who lure women and children to their deaths, usually using their enchanted violin. This most commonly occurs at Christmas or on Midsummer's Eve, with the Knockin targeting pregnant women or children that had yet to be baptized. Now, it's not easy to describe the appearance of the Knockin due to its tendency to shapeshift. However, reports have stated that he is a rather elegant man, oftentimes lurking inside the waterfall. Seems to be where all the hot men are lurking these days. However, sometimes he has been depicted as a brook horse. Be warned, the Knockin will become unhappy if he does not have access to water, with tales emerging of one spirit who went to live with a human after they had fallen in love, but was unable to stay due to their deep yearning to be by the water. So if you ever find yourself lured in by the Knockin, just drain that waterfall and run away. Easy enough, right? However, don't fret too much, with most crediting this legend as a manifestation of the dangers associated with water. And finally, coming in at number 1, trolls. I mean, of course, trolls are the primary legend in all of Scandinavian mythology and folklore. Old Norse history describes trolls as beings that dwell in isolated rocks, mountains, or caves and lives together in small family units that are rarely useful to human beings. Now, trolls are said to be inspired by the cruel giants who were the primary enemies of the gods who lived in the mountains of Utgard. They are said to have human-like appearance, but they are incredibly big and ugly. No shame, just facts. Now, like all legends, it varies from source to source, with some trolls being dim-witted, some have no particular grotesque characteristics, to others being dangerous to human beings. Now, although some are described as being man-eaters and as turning to stone upon contact with the sun, trolls are also attested as being solitary beings living far away from civilization. Upon the arrival of Christianity around the 1300s, the stories began to change, with stories emerging of the trolls being able to smell the blood of a Christian man, with them basically representing anything of the old times, which the new religion condemned. In at number 5 we have Space Mountain. There are a surprising amount of urban legends surrounding this ride at Disney World, which is odd, it is just a ride after all, right? Nothing strange about it. According to legend, one rider was decapitated while on Space Mountain because he supposedly stood up while riding. What an idiot. Now, this is only a little bit true. There was a decapitation, but it was on a test dummy, not a real person. No person has ever been killed while riding Space Mountain. However, there is another dark legend that surrounds this ride. According to legend, on Space Mountain you can find Mr. One-Way. Some accounts describe Mr. One-Way as a red-haired man with a red face, with stories stating that he hangs out in the line for Space Mountain. But this differs depending on who you ask. According to video footage, Mr. One-Way will sometimes get onto the ride with other passengers, grabbing an available seat. However, it is said that he disappears right before you reach the final tunnel at the end of the ride. On top of that, there is supposedly a second ghost called Disco Debbie, who is also said to haunt Space Mountain, and according to some riders, she glows in the dark. Very freaky indeed. Coming in at number 4 we have Magnolia Creek Lake. Magnolia was once a thriving riverport town in southern Wakulla County, Florida, which was established all the way back in the 1820s and is now classified as an extinct city by the State Library and Archives of Florida. All that remains of the city is a cemetery, with the last known burial being back in 1859. Magnolia Creek Lane is a narrow road fit for one car at a time south of Montverde on the west side of Lake Apopka. According to legend, the road and surrounding lake is haunted by around 200 passengers who were killed in a train wreck. However, many have attempted to find evidence of this, but none has ever been found, yet the legend continues. Now, while the road appears to be built on an old train track, the only documented railroad runs slightly north of the location. Now, this road is supposedly where all kinds of horrible things happened back in the 1890s, and according to some locals, at the creek that runs to Lake Apopka, you can hear the loud screams in the woods. However, when you get closer, they move farther away. The screams are said to be that of the train crew that died. However, skeptics believe this is actually sound that is being reflected from another place. According to a local, Michelle, she said, I quote, "My cousin went to Montverde Academy and heard about this road that runs off 455 that used to be a railroad bed. And they say that if you go down there at night, you can hear ghostly sounds and see eerie shadows of people walking on the road. I don't know for sure about this because I never went there, so it is just what I heard." Coming in at number 3, the Alaska Triangle. The Alaska Triangle, oftentimes called Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, is a place in the untouched wilderness of the frontier state where a large number of people have gone missing. The triangle connects Anchorage, Juneau, and Barrow, with the latter being a small town on the state's north coast, and has some of North America's most unforgiving wilderness. Now, the triangle began attracting attention back in October 1972, when a small private plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, and Bush pilot Don Johns vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. Following the incident, more planes began to go down, as well as hikers going missing. Even Alaskan residents and tourists seemed to just vanish into thin air without any explanation. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, with a missing person rate at more than twice the national average, which is absolutely terrifying. Why aren't we talking about this? Now, the disappearances are often blamed on everything from severe weather to aliens to swirling energy vortexes to an evil shape-shifting demon of Tlingit Indian lore called Kushtaka. Absolutely insane, but I respect these theories. Honestly, it's probably just the weather, but you're cool. In at number 2, Saberwolf. Legend has it that Inuits described a wolf-like evil spirit of the Nahanni Valley that kills people by biting their heads off. In some reports, the animal had long saber-toothed fangs and weighed upwards of 600 pounds, all of which they would use to hunt and kill their prey. The so-called monster has been spotted in Alaska at least once by an American mechanic, who described it as a wolf on steroids, as well as the crew of an American TV show, Alaska Monsters, who claimed to have an encounter with the beast. However, there may be an historical answer for the beast. Way back when, there was an animal called the direwolf that lived up until the most recent ice age. Thanks to research, science tells us that this wolf averaged about 100 to 150 pounds and was first thought to be predecessors to dogs as well as the grey wolf. The direwolf had bone-crushing jaws. However, archaeological evidence suggests it was a scavenger as well as a hunter. However, whether they still exist today, no one has a definitive answer, so perhaps it is a direwolf folks have been spotting, or maybe it is a saber wolf. What do you guys think though? Could just be a wolf. And finally, in at number 1, the abandoned copper mine. This abandoned copper mining camp is a National Historic Landmark district that became a bustling mining camp filled with miners and their families. Now, in 1925, a geologist predicted that the area would soon be mined out, and he was correct, because by 1938 Kennecott was a ghost town, and as of today is a popular tourist attraction. Now, more interesting still, in the Kennecott mines, it was not gold that folks were digging for, but instead copper. After copper was discovered in 1900 in the area, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the incredibly rich copper before, of course, it was abandoned along with the railroad, which was eventually abandoned due to the cost of constantly changing its position across a nearby glacier, and the mining camp in turn became a ghost town, a very haunted ghost town at that. According to reports, the spectral phenomena in the area, which included tombstones appearing and then vanishing along hiking trails, sounds of crying children, and poltergeist activity, was enough to drive away state government workers who were trying to redevelop the area into government housing projects during the 1990s. Yikes. If you want to venture into the supernatural realm, you can, with the abandoned mine offering tours for those brave souls. Coming in at 5, Huldra, also known as Hulda. These are seductive forest creatures found in Scandinavian folklore. Huldra derives from a root meaning covered or secret and is often depicted as just one individual. However, through folklore, it has changed to an entire Hulda race and not just one single entity. Hulda is described as being a troll-like woman living in the woods and is known to be fair and beautiful, but wild, and is known to have long hair which she hides behind her back upon meeting a human. This legend goes that Adam and Eve had a handful of children, and one day when Eve was giving her children a bath, God came to visit her. However, Eve had not yet bathed all her children, so she hid the ones that were dirty. God asked her, "Are there not more children?" Eve said no. So God responded, "Then let all that is hidden remain hidden." And thus the ones hidden became the underjuriski. Excuse my pronunciation, please. Which means the ones living underground. The hidden children became lost souls under the surface of the earth, calling for someone to be with them, usually human passerbys. Huldra was one of these children, yet somehow managed to remain on the surface of the earth. Be warned, she is neither good nor evil and cannot be trusted. Coming in at 4, Jotni, also known as Jotun or Jotnar. This legend is described as being a type of entity contrasted with gods and other figures such as dwarfs and elves. In Norse mythology, Jotni appears as a giant being, often ugly and lumpy, with many of them in possession of great knowledge. Oftentimes the Jotny is described as riding on a wolf with vipers as reins and is believed to be depicted in this 10th century picture stone from the Hunnestad monument. As I previously stated, most Jotny possess great wisdom. For example, Vavtrudni, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was clad with the very same knowledge as Odin. Legend goes that the Jotny are Thor's most dangerous opponent, and is a major motif in Norse mythology, with the Jotny residing in the Great Mountain area of southern Norway. Now throughout history the folklore has become blurred, with some stories blending Jotny and trolls together into one, but that is simply not the case, with these two legends having very separate histories throughout folklore. And that's the tea.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Skinwalkers. These Navajo legends have been cited all over, but have quite a reputation in Arizona. Medicine men possessed by spirits having to choose between good and evil. Often hermits being exiled from their communities. They take the forms of many animals and travel through the wastes. If driving through the arid desert at night wasn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear about what skinwalkers like to do. Often they'll travel alongside lone vehicles in the dark, even when the car is hoofing it. They'll tap on the windows of the vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention. If the driver stops to see what's going on and gets out of their car, it's not likely that they're coming back. Yikes. There are some hot spots that locals try to avoid at night. Apparently there's a ranch that has been given the name Skinwalker Ranch thanks to the huge amounts of reports made, and San Carlos Reservation is also a place most will warn you away from during the night. Although most forests at night have their fair share of spooky denizens. There's one tale of a man camping alone that really makes you question whether a little adventure is worth it or not. He was hiking along with his dog and found an empty cave to set up camp in. As he unpacked his stuff, he noticed some unsettling cave paintings along the walls. Later that same night, he was woken up by his dog ferociously barking. As he sat up to see what was the matter, he saw a malformed creature slinking near the entrance of the cave. Acting quickly, he shot at it with his rifle, but this only stunned the creature. It called out to him, saying that it wanted to help. Sure. At this point, the man grabbed his dog and hightailed it out of there, leaving all his stuff. He hasn't gone back since. Hopefully he didn't leave anything too valuable behind, although he did escape with his dog and his life, which are valuable enough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Haunted Antique Mall. Back to Tucson for more terror and troubles, there's an old 2-story furniture store that was converted into an antique mall of sorts. You know the kind, set up like a flea market with all sorts of independent booths selling their wares. Well, one day customers were walking around upstairs looking at the assorted antiques, and they heard some clicking noises. One particularly curious antiquer decided to investigate and found the source. An old typewriter. The thing is, no one was around to operate it. The customers who had heard the typing were the only people upstairs. After that, more and more ghostly tales appeared. Furniture that was left neat and tidy at closing would be strewn throughout the aisles the next morning. Radios would increase in volume with no one around. Employees found themselves frozen in place from time to time, experiencing a distortion of time. They would be stuck there as customers passed by in fast or slow motion. Apparitions would appear all over, sometimes appearing as a grinning boy, other times as a mischievous-looking teenager. Nobody knows who these wraiths belong to. After hearing loud crashing noises upstairs but finding nothing displaced, the owners decided it was time to close down the upper level. Now, considering that all sorts of people were bringing in antiques from different sources, it is possible that all these ghosts came from haunted objects. Or it could be that the furniture store itself is haunted. Nobody's come up with concrete proof of the hauntings, but if you ever find yourself antiquing in Tucson, watch out for paranormal activity. And finally, at number 1, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. I mean, the name of this canyon should be enough to give me to its bad news. Let me say it again. Slaughterhouse Canyon. Come on. The tale that accompanies the terrifying name comes from the gold rush back in the 1800s. A young family moved out to try their hand at striking it rich. However, this plan did not go very well. Soon they were hungry and destitute. The father would often head out for days, searching for food to sustain him and his family. Tragically, one day he never returned. Without the father to keep them fed, the family slowly starved. As their bodies wasted away, so too did their minds. Eventually, the mother couldn't take it anymore. Her children's cries were too much for her to bear. She donned her wedding dress and ritualistically killed her children. Carrying the corpses down to the nearby river, she wept and screamed. After she dropped their bodies into the water, she wandered around until succumbing to starvation soon after. This sad story forever marred the reputation of Slaughterhouse Canyon.
Coming in at 5, Princess Brunhild at Rostrap. This legend goes that years ago there ruled a king in Bohemia whose castle was atop a lofted mountain where thunder and eagles found a home. Now this king had a daughter, Princess Brunhild, whose beauty was famous far and wide. Rulers and their sons sons sought the hand of the maiden, and among the suitors came the son of the King of Hars, who won her heart. He returned to his father to announce his betrothal, and to make arrangement for the nuptials. However, someone had other plans. A new suitor arrived for Brunhilde's hand, a terrible giant who inhabited North Europe, terrifying all those who saw him. He brought with him costly gifts of gold, amber, and precious stones, and after a few days of consideration, the king promised the giant his daughter. Now the giant had two steeds, one white as snow and the other black as night, both giant, with the earth trembling beneath them as they ran. So one day Brunhilde begged to ride with the giant. She mounted the white steed and raced to be with her true love Hars. The black steed was in quick pursuit behind her. At the very top of the treacherous Rostrap, Brunhilde reached the cliff edge. However, her brave white stallion had other ideas and jumped right across the mountain and reached the other side. The giant, however, did not, and ultimately plunged to his death. Atop the Rostrap hill in the Hars mountain range, you will find the hoof shapes imprinted into the rock on the edge of the cliff, marking the path the great white steed took when freeing the trapped princess. Coming in at 4, the Wattsman Mountain. The Wattsman is a mountain in the Bavarian Alps and is the third highest in Germany, and the highest mountain located entirely on German territory. Now, for a mountain so famous throughout the country, you can imagine there would be a handful of legends associated with it. And that there are. One legend goes that in the deepest corners of southern Bavaria, a tyrannical king named Wattsman reigned the land, and enjoyed slavery and hunting local peasants. On one particular day, after a series of bloody killings, a curse was cast upon him and his family, which resulted in them all turning to stone. Now it is said that they are still entombed within the range of 7 mountains, near the town of Berchtesgaden. Would you climb this peak to discover if the legend is true? If so, I'll be right there with you. Coming in at 3, UFO encounter in Manitoba. All the way back in 1967, Stefan McCalloch ventured into the woods around Falcon Lake near Winnipeg, Manitoba, in search of silver and quartz, when he was startled by a gaggle of geese that erupted into a clattering of honks. According to his own report, he then noticed 2 cigar-shaped crafts hovering in the air before one flew away. However, the other one landed. Stefan stated that he waited half an hour before approaching. He heard mechanical noises, smelled sulfur, and felt warm air as he gradually got closer. As he did, he noticed an open door panel, and coming from within were coloured lights and muffled voices that sounded like humming. Then, out of nowhere, the door panel closed, and a blast of gas from the craft knocked Stefan back and off his feet, with his clothes being set ablaze. He managed to take them off and ran into town when he began to feel extremely sick. Doctors quickly discovered that his sickness was caused by radiation, and officials who checked the site also discovered radioactive soil samples and metal melted into the rocks. Now, since then, the son of Stefan has written a book about the ongoing mystery. Stan McCalloch, the son of Stefan, has previously stated that he very clearly remembers the day his dad came home sick and injured after something happened to him in the Falcon Lake woods. I quote, "I recalled seeing him in bed. He didn't look good at all. He looked pale, haggard. When I walked into the bedroom, there was a huge stink in the air, like a real horrible aroma of sulfur and burnt motor. It was all around and it was coming out of his pores. It was bad." The book was launched back in 2017 in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the incident. In at 2, Headless Ghosts in Old Montreal. The historic neighbourhood of Old Montreal in Quebec is known to be one of the most haunted places in all of Canada. The city's oldest road, St. Paul Street, is supposedly a walkway for the paranormal at night, with visitors often reporting sightings of ghostly horse-drawn carriages or an apparition of Marie Joseph Angelique wearing the same white robe she had on when she was executed. Not only that, but Mary Gallagher, former Lady of the Night, is reported to appear on William and Murray Streets every 7 years, looking for her head, which was taken off by her one-time best friend. If this doesn't do it for you, you can also head over to the Old Montreal graveyards, which are known to be abound with ghostly activity, especially in Mount Royal, North America's largest intact cemetery. Visitors have claimed to see apparitions wandering around the plots at night, as well as hear giggling, creaking, and other eerie noises coming from within the cemetery. More interesting still, some of the ghosts that people have reported seeing include several people who perished on the Titanic, and an often seen Algonquin man who looks over the cliff to the city below. below. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Cave Monster. One of the most haunting legends to come out of Canada comes to us from my city, Toronto, once again, and supposedly took place in August 1978. It was during this time that a 51-year-old man named Ernest went looking for his missing kitten in a Parliament Street tunnel after crawling into an opening near his apartment building. This is where he described seeing a monster that had grey fur, red eyes, and weighing approximately 30 pounds. Now, if you're not from Toronto, we have a sprawling path system, 28 kilometers of climate controlled underground walkways and shopping. However, what if I told you this wasn't the only underground city we have? Well, as reported by the Toronto Sun in March 1979, about 10 feet into the tunnel that Ernest explored, he spotted a thin, human-like figure some 3 feet tall, with, as previously mentioned, grey fur and slanted orange-red eyes. The creature supposedly hissed at him, stating, get out," before fleeing down a side tunnel. Now, it is possible that Ernest was hallucinating or even lying, although saying that, the way the article was written seems to suggest that Laurie Goldstein, the reporter, believed him. Unfortunately, we'll likely never know what actually happened. When the story broke, the entrance to the tunnel had effectively been blocked off by collapsing concrete. Goldstein no longer remembers where the opening was, making the location virtually impossible to find. However, not long ago, someone online spoke of the underground tunnel that may have brought new light to the mystery. I quote, "There is a small opening to the underground tunnels off Parliament Street in downtown Toronto. The entrance is between 2 apartment buildings and leads to the tunnels via the sewers. The underground city beneath Toronto has its centre beneath Gerrard Street and Church Street. Above this area, strange magnetic effects have been observed. It is believed that underground equipment utilising powerful magnetic fields are responsible for the bizarre equipment failures that often are the cause of these accidents." Well, now we know the tunnels are real, do you believe the monster is? You decide. In at 5, the Lady in Red in Lower Bay Station. Now, a Lady in Red is a popular theme in many legends and ghost stories, with few popping up across America and Canada. However, this one comes from Toronto, specifically below Bay Station, where another subway station lies, Lower Bay Station. The Toronto Transit Commission reportedly opened the station in 1966 while experimenting with routes, but soon realised that if the route was to become delayed, it would slow down the entire subway system. Therefore, it was shut down just 6 months later. The city later went on to build Bay Station on top of it, connecting the 2 platforms with a red door that is only accessible to employees. Workers and occasional movie productions still use the old station, however, and it is here that folks have claimed to have seen the Lady in Red wandering the abandoned tracks. People have reported that she has no legs and had only black holes for eyes. Her apparition only lingers for 30 seconds before disappearing. Some believe it to be a woman that was pushed onto the tracks, but no records of any such incident exist. Others think it's more likely she was a former resident of Potter's Field, a cemetery for social outcasts and the poor, which the city attempted to relocate in 1855 to build the station. Coming in at 4, the legend of Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. The Gibraltar Point Lighthouse is located on the Toronto Islands in Toronto. Beginning in 1808, it is the oldest existing lighthouse on the Great Lakes and one of Toronto's oldest buildings. Now, due to its age, this lighthouse is of course shrouded in mystery, specifically regarding its first keeper, J.P. Radamula. According to the legend, soldiers from Fort York visited J.P. on the evening of January 2nd, 1815 in search of his bootlegged beer, but they had too much to drink and a dispute broke out, culminating in the keeper's murder. The inebriated soldiers tried to conceal their crime by chopping apart the corpse and hiding the remains. In 1893, then keeper George Dernan searched for the corpse and found part of a jawbone and coffin fragments near the lighthouse, though it was never definitively proven that they were linked to JP. As one of the oldest legends in Toronto, the truth behind the lighthouse keeper's death and disappearance remains a mystery even to this day, and the legend certainly lives on. Coming in at number 3, I-4 Dead Zone. Interstate 4 is a highway in Florida that spans 130 32 miles, with it running from Tampa all the way to Daytona Beach. Now, the interstate is frequented daily by folks heading to work and those on their way to Disney World. Now, while it is a popular highway, it is also another nickname for it, the Dead Zone, an area where folks need to be particularly careful. This area of the highway has been the location of many accidents, electronic malfunctions, as well as supposed ghost sightings. So why exactly is this spot so dangerous and filled with so much paranormal activity? Well, this is because this quarter mile of highway was built over a grave site, and as we know from movies, a disturbed grave site means bad news bears. It means you're in for a nasty surprise. It means you're gonna die. Don't believe it? Well, oddly enough, on the very first day the new interstate was opened, a tractor trailer carrying frozen goods lost control and crashed directly above the disturbed graves of people who had died from yellow fever. It is believed that around 1,500 to 2,000 accidents have occurred on the highway since 1963, which is a lot. And worse still, many of those accidents resulted in death, and between a 24-month period, there were around 44 car accidents, resulting in approximately 65 people being injured. Some locals fear this area of the highway so much that they actually take a much longer route around it. On top of all of this, back in the 1950s, a young boy was said to have disturbed the graves, and the following night he was killed by a drunk driver, and to add insult to injury, the driver was never caught. Coming in at number 2, we have the Devil's Chair, also known as the Haunted Chair. This is an urban legend hailing from folklore that is attached to a class of funerary or memorial sculpture common throughout the United States during the 19th century. Now, these chairs were known as the mourning chairs for visitors to cemeteries to sit on when visiting loved ones. However, since then, cemeteries have provided benches for similar purposes. Once the original purpose of these chairs fell out of fashion, superstition quickly developed in association with sitting in the chair. For example, some young people dare one another to visit the site, most often after dark or at midnight, or in some cases on Halloween. Stories state that if you sit in the chair at these specific times, something awful will happen, with people fearing that they will be punished. In Florida specifically, the Devil's Chair is located in Cassadaga, Florida, and is a graveside bench in the cemetery that borders Cassadaga as well as Lake Helen. According to legend, an unopened can of beer left on the chair will be empty by morning. Now, in some stories, the can has already been opened, and in others, the liquid is simply gone through the unopened top. On top of that, it is said that the devil will sometimes appear to anyone bold enough to sit in the chair itself. So if you do decide to visit the chair at night and take a seat expecting to meet the devil, just be sure to have a beer in hand ready for him, because it is said that he will be expecting one. As am I, all the time. I would like a beer. Maybe that's why I'm evil. I'm the devil. And finally, coming in at number 1, Legend of the Skunk Cape. Also known as the Swamp Cabbage Man, Swamp Ape, Stink Ape, Florida Bigfoot, and Louisiana Bigfoot, this is a creature that is said to inhabit Florida and is named for its appearance and for its unpleasant odor that is said to accompany it. The ape has supposedly been a part of Florida folklore since the settler period, which is absolutely insane. One of the first reports of the skunk ape in Florida came from the year 1818, when a report spoke of a man-sized monkey or ape raiding stores and stalking fishermen. This became particularly common in the 60s and 70s, with one sighting occurring in 1974, which spoke of a large, foul-smelling, hairy ape-like creature, which was said to run upright on 2 legs in the neighborhood of Dade County, Florida. However, some people were skeptical, including investigator Joe Nickel, who stated that these reports may represent a black bear, and that other sightings may in fact be hoaxes or misidentification of wildlife. In terms of appearance, the creature is said to resemble the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest. However, the skunk cape is said to be shorter in comparison. It has long patches of fur on the shoulders and arm, and is often described as a mottled rusty red colour as opposed to the Sasquatch's brown and black coat. Coming in at number 5, Baranov Castle. Now, I should begin by saying that Alaska doesn't have any actual castles, however it used to. It was the Baranov Castle and was home to many Russian governors in the 1800s. As of today, what remains is the hill the castle stood upon, and the gorgeous hill that spirits now reside on. Now, the castle has a history spanning far longer than Alaska has been a part of the USA, which I guess isn't that long, to be fair. Even before the castle was abandoned, tales of a mysterious ghost of a lady in dark clothing had become a local legend. It was supposed that she was a Russian aristocrat who had committed suicide on her wedding night after marrying a man she did not love. Now she walks Castle Hill and sometimes the Russian bishop's house nearby. She is also said to be draped in diamonds and a long black veil, She is said to be out most often at the midnight hour, aren't they all? And you may catch a glimpse of her bemoaning her fate. The area is known as Castle Hill in Sitka, and the site remains a popular tourist attraction. However, that is mostly due to the supernatural elements surrounding the mount. Would you dare step foot on Castle Hill? I dare you. In at number 4, Christmas Town. There's quite literally a city in Alaska called North Pole, where it is Christmas all year round. Which is a dream come true, I want to live there. However, this quaint Christmas town has a notorious reputation. In 2006, the snowy little suburb of Fairbanks was hit with a horrific incident when a group of 6 middle school students were arrested for plotting a Columbine-style mass murder at their school. The 7th graders planned to knock out North Pole Middle School's power and telephone systems, then move systematically through the school, shooting and murdering the teachers, as well as students who picked on them. Absolutely horrible. Now, their plan would have moved forward if it weren't for an anonymous student who overheard their plans and reported them to the authorities. Thank God. It turned out that at least 6 students had knowledge of the plot too, but had failed to inform anyone about the potential killing spree. Seems now that Christmas Town has an awful legend surrounding it, with many movies based on the town depicting it as something rotten and dangerous, maybe even haunted. Coming in at 3, the Changeling. A changeling is a creature found in folklore throughout Europe, specifically Germany, and is believed to be a fairy child that had been left in place of a human child stolen by the fairies. It's a common theme stemming all the way back to medieval literature and reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with diseases or disorders. So this specific legend goes that once upon a time, at Heslock near Odenheim, a servant and a cook of a clergyman were married and living together. However, their newborn baby would not grow or gain weight. The mother was told to visit Newhausen and give her baby water from the Syriac spring, with many believing that a visit to the spring would either restore a child back to health or would kill it within 9 days. En route to the spring, the child became heavy and monstrous in her arms, which resulted in a passing traveller yelling to the wife that she had the devil on her back. I quote, "Your child is at home in a new cradle behind the chest in the side room. Throw this monster into the brook." The mother cried but did as she was told. She threw the creature into the brook and a great howl bellowed from beneath the bridge. She fled home, where she found her baby, healthy and laughing in its brand new cradle. Coming in at 2, the Childrens Crusade. According to history, the Childrens Crusade was a failed crusade by European Christians to regain the Holy Land from the Muslims, said to have taken place in 1212. Now, the story has become blurred over the years from factual to more mythical, with some versions including the visions by a French boy and a German boy, an intention to peacefully convert Muslims in the Holy Land to Christianity, with bands of children marching to Italy, and some being sold into slavery. Yeah, it's rough. In this specific German legend though, the story tells of a misguided German boy who was visited by Jesus, who told him to go forth and convert Muslims. So, following the orders of Christ, he gathered a sizable group, mostly children, and led them towards the Mediterranean, where they took boats east. Now, during their journey, one boat crashed, killing everyone on board. The others, however, arrived in Tunisia, where the children were sold into slavery, and in turn, none of them made it to their destination. Sad. I would have rather been on the boat. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Werewolf of Morbach. This legend goes that the Rhineland town of Wittlich is the last place in Germany where a werewolf had been killed. Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweister, what a name that is, was a supposed deserter from Napoleon's army and fled to his homeland in France. While passing through Wittlich, him and his hungry soldiers who fled with him located a farmhouse which they pillaged. However, in the process they were discovered by a farmer who they promptly killed along with his sons. The farmer's wife witnessed the deed and cursed Thomas, screaming, "From now on at each full moon you will change into a rabid wolf." So what did Thomas do? He crushed her skull. Of course. Anyway, as time went on, the curse began to take effect and Thomas's personality changed. He began to rob, rape and pillage until he eventually fled to the sanctuary of the deep forest, where he took on his wolf form. He began to slaughter livestock and animals in his new form before a group of villagers discovered him, killed him near the village of Morbach, and buried him. They lit a candle that would burn continually. As long as the candle is lit, the werewolf could never return.
Number 5 on this list is the Falling Boy. This is a sad legend that's probably true. The Black Church is located in the Romanian city of Brasov and is a beautiful old Gothic church. It almost never made it to 2022 though, because several hundred years ago it had a horrible fire. The church did manage to survive and had a bunch of renovations done on it to spruce it up. It's around this period of time that people think the falling boy statue was erected. On one single pillar of the exterior of the church, there's a statue of a boy who looks to be falling over. Either that or he's searching for something on the ground. It's difficult to say for sure. Either way, no one has any idea why this statue is here, and 3 legends have come out explaining it. Arena Webb writes, some say that he was the son of a priest and that he was naughty. As a punishment, his father sent him in the church's attic. But then the Great Fire started and so the boy got trapped in there. The statue was built depicting him trying to escape the flames. Another legend, and a more popular one, is that the boy was helping with the construction of the church. At one point, his boss told him to check if the wall is straight. He leaned over the walls and he fell. His boss felt guilty and ordered a statue. Others, though, say it was murder. They say that this boy was so good working at the construction of the church that a fellow worker got envious. He sent the boy to check the walls and he pushed him. The boy died, but the man couldn't live with the guilt, so he confessed shortly after. The other builders decided to make the statue in the boy's memory. So those are the 3 legends about the boy, and sadly all of them result in the boy's death. Now it's thought that his spirit still lingers here at this church, and if you're lucky, you may even be able to spot him. Comment down below what you guys think about this legend and which of the 3 stories you believe the most. Curious to know what you guys got. Number 4 on this list is the Pied Piper. You've most likely heard the name and probably the story of the Pied Piper before. If you haven't, then let me read off a great passage from Andre Diamond describing the tale. The Pied Piper legend originated in Hamelin, Germany during the Middle Ages. As the story goes, the town was struggling with a rat infestation problem and was desperate for relief. A mysterious man in pied clothing approached the mayor and promised he could rid the city of its problem in return for payment of 1,000 guilders. The mayor agreed, and the man played a magical pipe to lure all the city's rats to a nearby body of water where they drowned. When the piper returned for his reward, the mayor refused. As if visualizing a rat infestation was not traumatizing enough, the story then takes another sinister turn. Furious that he had been cheated, the piper soon returned to the town of Hamelin on St. John's and Paul's Day. As the grown members of the town attend church, the piper once again played his magical pipe through the streets, this time luring the town's 130 children from their homes. Depending on the version of the story, he either led them to the lake or into a cave, and none were ever seen again. Most versions agree there were a few children left behind. One was crippled and he could not keep up, one was deaf so he could not hear the music, and one was blind and could not see where the other children were going. When church let out, the survivors told the townspeople what had happened, and the rest is history. Now you're probably thinking, okay Nick, well what the hell does this have to do with Romania? Well, there's another version of this legend that says this man took the into Vaghis Cave and then after a time slowly let them out. Vaghis Cave is in Transylvania, and it's believed by the locals that this Pied Piper still lives there. They also think that this is the true version of the legend because there's a very large population of German-speaking Saxons in that area. These people are thought to be the descendants of the children who were taken so many years ago. Even to this day though, everyone still fears Vaghis Cave and still fears the Piper.
Coming in at number 3, the Jervis Ghosts. Jervis Street, located in the middle of Dublin's city centre, has served as the backdrop for many encounters with the unknown and the world of the dead through their eyes, proving that ghosts can be seen and felt almost anywhere, even on populated high streets. The Jervis Shopping Centre opened back in 1996 and is currently home to over 70 retailers, and surprisingly is a popular destination for many ghost hunters out there. Some history for you. Not everyone may know this, but the shopping centre was actually built on the ground of Jervis Street Hospital, which closed in the 1980s after attending the needs of the sick and dying for almost 300 years. Many of course credit the creepy goings on in Jervis Street area to the restless spirits who died in its wards. In 2008, a newsreader from the radio station Today FM was apparently walking along the busy street outside Jervis Shopping Centre only to be stopped in their tracks by a female voice singing a lullaby close by. Creepy. The newsreader assumed they were hearing things and continued to walk with the lullaby fading out. out. However, it quickly became louder again as she moved further away. The moment lingered with her to the point that she mentioned it on her talk show, and within minutes the lines were flooded with callers citing similar occurrences. Many workers from the shopping centre claimed to have seen the figure of a woman in an old nurse's uniform wandering between the stores, while others told of fruit being tossed through the air by seemingly no one. One person, while approaching the centre's bathrooms, was eyed by a woman who whispered at them before vanishing into thin air, and several others mentioned having met similar spirits not far from the centre. Sure, that makes sense. Coming in at 2, the moving mother of Spittle. In July 1985, something strange occurred in the village of Spittle, Cork. While travelling home one evening, a local reported seeing a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary moving on its own accord. And while some summed it up to a trick of the light, countless other locals have also reported similar occurrences. People from the village as well as people from abroad flocked to the site where the activity seemed to be occurring, with up to 100,000 people said to have visited Spittle alone. The Catholic Church was of course a little uncertain of the legitimacy of the case, with one bishop outright calling it an illusion. According to a team of psychologists from University Cork though, the vision was the result of staring at stationary objects during the transient light of dusk. Anthropologist Peter Mulholland also said that the visions of the Virgin Mary in Irish culture is simply the result of the population's relationship with religion. However, what the answer is anyone's guess. There's plenty out there who truly believe the Mother of God did appear all over Ireland between July and August of 1985. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Black Cat of Kilkee. Back in 1968, Margaret O'Brien and her husband purchased an abandoned home on the outskirts of Dublin City. However, they could have never predicted the events that were soon to unfold. Margaret originally intended to restore the property and turn it into an art centre, so she allowed several workmen to live on site to maintain pace. Soon though, the workmen began to report back to the O'Briens with some disturbing stories. After dark each night, they would hear animal sounds from within the walls of the house, even though they couldn't find any evidence of an infestation. Margaret disregarded their concerns, however she quickly came to learn of the building's strange condition herself. One evening when arriving at the house to speak with the project's lead painter, Margaret was met with more claims of wild animals loose on the property. So this time she agreed to stay the night in order to observe. Walking to her room, she saw for the first time a gargantuan black cat sitting in the middle of the hallway. She claimed the creature was no ordinary house cat, but rather panther-esque, with evil and intelligence in its gaze. In a split second though, the creature disappeared. Soon after the incident, the lead painter was visited by the huge cat, however this time it brought along with it mist. Due to all of these events, Margaret contacted a local priest to perform an exorcism on the home, as you would, which actually seemed to be effective, so Margaret finally opened the art centre. However, peace didn't last, because one evening a group of drunken actors decided to hold a seance in an attempt to call upon the monstrous cat that they had heard so much about. They were seemingly successful because the haunting resumed more powerfully this time, with the cat now being joined by the malevolent spirits of 2 nuns who began to terrorize the building's gallery. This time Margaret called for a medium for help and finally learned the truth of the cat. The medium told her that the female spirits had been attendants of the satanic rituals performed by the infamous Hellfire Club. She went on to suggest that the house was once owned by its members. Recently in 2012, the theory finally got some bulk, with another site said to have been frequented by Hellfire members, with a painting of a black cat bathed in flames being uncovered. Kicking off with a short one at number 5, we have the Drowgan, who is the ghost of a man who died at sea. In one specific iteration, a man fled from a ghost, calling out to the dead to save him. The next day, the cemetery was covered in seaweed and the graves were wide open. Many claim to see the Drowgan, huge and covered in seaweed, particularly during storms, where he will skin boats and drown sailors. This dude is no fun at all. I would just say stay away from the ocean, stay away from water in general. That is my motto. Coming in at 4, Myling. This is perhaps one of the most disturbing ghost stories, with Myling telling the tale of unwanted or murdered children. Yeah, nothing fun here. Oftentimes the ghosts are referred to as upbird, meaning that which is outside. The ghosts of these children long to be given a proper burial, so they jump on the back of the first person they meet and demand to be taken to a cemetery. In some cases, the Myling drains power from its human ride, and in others, the human is too weak and dies from exertion. The ghost often takes on human form as it gets closer to the burial ground, and is described as a very large spirit. The root of the Myling is believed to be a response to instances of unexplained deaths of children. Yeah, this one is dark. Sure, that makes sense. In at 3, the Witch's Tree. On 6th Street and Park Ave in Louisville, Kentucky, you will find what can only be described as a natural monstrosity. A knotted tree, so misshapen and tortured that it could easily serve as a portal to hell. Now, even if the tree itself didn't catch your attention, the trinkets, baubles, and bead necklaces hanging from the branches certainly would. They are items that have been placed by the Louisville locals to appease the vengeful witches. Now, the legend of the bizarre tree begins in the late 19th century, where it was supposedly the gathering place for a coven of witches, where they would perform their ceremonies. All was well until a city planning committee decided to remove the tree ahead of the annual May Day celebration. This, of course, displeased the witches greatly, so much so that they cast a curse. Exactly 11 months to the day after the tree was cut down, the city suffered a storm so severe it was assumed by locals that the witches had made good on their curse and summoned a storm demon. Now, during this horrendous storm, lightning struck the stump of the old witch's tree, and suddenly a new tree began to grow. However, it was not a healthy tree, but rather twisted and otherworldly. Now, whether these stories are true or not, the locals of Louisville believe this tree houses something dark and sinister, and to this day continue to adorn it with baubles and trinkets. In at 2, the Headless Woman of Iroquois Park. Iroquois Park is a 739-acre park in Louisville, Kentucky, designed by Frederick Law Cherokee and Shawnee Parks. It is a serene and picturesque park with an old-growth forest and viewpoint atop the hill. However, as you wander through the forest and the winding trails on a warm night, you may begin to hear the sound of a dog barking wildly. Following that, a thick fog will roll in, partially obstructing your vision. Then, you will smell the stench of smoke and fire begin to rise in the air. The fog will break, but just for a moment, and then you'll see a figure begin to approach. Now, accounts vary, but some state that a woman will appear dressed in early 1800 settlement clothes, and as she walks through the park, you can see her very clearly holding her head in her hands as blood drips from her severed neck. The legend has been passed down from generation to generation, with each new storyteller making it much more gruesome. For those looking for a thrill, it is said that the Headless Woman is regularly seen close to the lookout point, with some suspecting that she is the ghost of a farmer's wife who settled with her husband in the area where the park is now located. The story goes that one night while her husband was downtown on business, an Indian tribe attempted to sneak up on the homestead and ransack it. The intruders grabbed the woman and beheaded her before promptly setting fire to the home. Now, whether you believe this is that very same woman is up to you, but regardless, there have been far too many accounts of parkgoers seeing the Headless Woman for it to be simply legend. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Pope Lick Monster. The Pope Lick Monster is said to be a part man, part goat, and part sheep creature reported to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, numerous urban legends exist about the creature and its origins, with some accounts claiming that the creature uses hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto the trestle in order to kill them. However, other accounts claim that the creature jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. No matter what the story, the creature is so unsettling to those who see it that they are driven to leap off of the trestle. Its origins vary, but some reports state that the human-goat hybrid was a circus freak who vowed revenge after being mistreated. In another version, the monster escaped from a train that was derailed on the trestle. And the final rumor is that the creature is really the twisted reincarnated form of a farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for satanic powers. No matter which way you spin it, this creature is horrifying and is said to be behind a number of deaths and accidents at the trestle since its initial construction, despite the now looming 8-foot fence built to keep thrill seekers out. In at number 5, we have the Beast of Hackney Marshes. This legend dates back to 1981 when 4 kids were crossing the marshes on a winter's morning. It is said that they happened upon, I quote, a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. Naturally, people began to assume that this was some kind of hideous monster. It remained a legend going forward, but wasn't spotted again until 2012 when it was captured on camera. Helen Murray, a university student, was out for a stroll near the dense woodland area when she said she was stopped in her tracks by an unknown animal, which she stated was larger than a person and covered in shaggy black fur. I quote, I tried to stay calm as I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was or if it was even alive. I had my phone ready to call 999, then the creature moved. Somehow I managed to take a couple of pictures before I ran. I managed to get away but was scared half to death. Now, she didn't contact the police because she feared they wouldn't believe believe her. However, the story certainly revived memories of the unexplained sighting that occurred in 81. Officers have stated that they believe neither of these sightings were hoaxes, and that 2 bear carcasses had previously been found nearby in the River Lee, and to this day it remains a mystery how they even got there. So, were the bears killed by this creature? Were the bears the creature? We don't have bears in England, so... Stumped. In at number 4, the Killer Pool in Epping Forest. Epping Forest is a 2,400 hectare area of ancient woodland between Epping in Essex and Forest Gate in Greater London. Over 100 lakes and ponds are found in the forest. However, there is only one that is referred to as the Killer or Suicide Pool. This legend grew rapidly in popularity after Irish author Elliot O'Donnell wrote about it in his book Haunted Britain, stating that there is a pool in Epping Forest that is home to unearthly presences, some miserable and some evil. Now, there is one story about the pool that goes as follows. Around 300 years ago, a couple engaged in a forbidden relationship, meeting secretly at the pond in the forest. However, the girl's father found out about the relationship, and in a fit of anger he killed her at the pool. After learning about his girlfriend's death, the lover committed suicide at the very same spot. Following these tragic events, no birds were heard and no animals were ever seen in that area again. The water also became dank, and not dank in a good way, bad dank. On top of that, it is said that people with no inclination went on to commit suicide there, including a woman in 1887 and a young servant, Emma Morgan, who killed herself and her child. Jumping forward to 1959, a competition in a magazine was held to find the exact location of the pool. One writer claimed to know but refused to reveal the details, stating that the place was evil beyond measure. I quote, "The suicide pool is deep in the heart of the forest, far from any road. It is dank, evil and malignant, with an atmosphere unpleasant beyond description. It doubt if the sunshine ever penetrates through the surrounding trees. If it did, it would never lighten the black waters."
Number 3 on this list is the Sacrificial Lakes. Most of the time when somebody enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in the said. Most of the time when someone enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in said body of water. What they usually aren't as concerned with is becoming food to the actual water itself. That's exactly what some people in Romania believe in regards to some of their bigger lakes though. Lake Vinderel, for instance, is known to some locals as a lake which will actually swallow people up. Even the most skilled swimmers who go here will drown and never be heard from again. Most of the time these bodies are never found, but there's a legend that says a piece of bloody flesh floats on top of the water at all times. Lake Vinderel is one of the most famous, but it isn't the only lake in Romania that has some dark lore around it. One lake literally swallowed up an entire town when a slope collapsed and forced the homes along with a church inside the water. People around that area often hear the ringing of church bells as they pass by the lake, thinking that the spirits of those who died in this tragedy still haunt the area. Because of all this death in these Romanian lakes, it's now believed that sacrifices must be made to keep the water at bay. Yep, that's right guys, what better way to stop people from dying in the lakes than to have people specifically die from the lakes? That's the train of thought, and it's most prevalent in the Maramureș region of Romania amongst the elderly folk who live there. They think that the only way to calm the dark spirits who clearly inhabit these waters is to occasionally offer a human sacrifice. Now I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't able to find exact details on who has been sacrificed or when, but I imagine that this has taken place at least once in Romania's history if there's an entire legend around it. I also find it kind of interesting that the Romanians don't have a particular demon or creature in mind who could be behind this. As of right now, it's just thought that there's a dangerous entity in the lake water and that sacrificing a human should relax that entity at least for a little while. Either way, if you're going to go swimming in Romania, then stay away from the lakes. Number 2 on this list is the World War II ghosts. There's a town called Ochna Muirs, and in that town there's a very specific mansion with some very interesting lore surrounding it. That mansion is called the Teleki Mansion. This mansion is really interesting because it didn't actually see much fighting at all, but is currently haunted with ghosts from World War II. The ghosts of these World War II soldiers who haunt this place sadly caused their tragic fate themselves. One evening, the soldiers went into the mansion and decided to enjoy a little bit too much wine. The mansion had cellars full of nice quality bottles, and the soldiers definitely overindulged. In fact, They got so hammered that they decided to start firing off their guns in the basement before passing out. They passed out in the cellar, and it's said that from the guns that they shot off, the wine started filling up the room. They were far too gone to notice and actually drowned in said wine. Now these soldiers haunt the mansion and locals see them regularly. In fact, some blurry photos were taken back in 2011 of these ghosts in the place. Dying is obviously worst case scenario and never what anyone wants, but I guess the one thing that you can say for these guys is that they probably died at least happy. Number 1 on this list is the Nymphs of Sioclavina Cave. Deep in the mountains of Transylvania, through a long road of rivers and beautiful scenery, sits a forgotten cave called the Sioclavina Cave. This cave is full of crazy stuff from the past and has been a really important find for archaeologists studying Romanian history. Tombs, treasures, skeletal remains, and most important, potential evidence of nymphs are all found in this mysterious cavern. In case you aren't familiar with what a nymph is, then Britannica tells us that they were usually associated with fertile, growing things such as trees or with water. They were not immortal but were extremely long-lived and were on the whole kindly disposed toward men. These were women in Greek mythology who were considered divinities. It's believed that this cave may have once been the home to some of them. The treasure that's been found here, some of the inscriptions that are on the wall, the overall environment outside the cave, all of it fits the bill when it comes to a nymph. At the very least, if a nymph or a group of nymphs hadn't have lived here, then people definitely think this would have been a site of worship for them. Animal carcasses were found here as well, and it's believed that they would have been used for some sacrificial rituals to such higher beings. Now this cave is researched extensively, and locals think that it might possess some mysterious powers. Also, that the rivers that run around this area are rich with minerals and other healing properties. I suppose this urban legend isn't super scary, but honestly kinda cool. Then again, nymphs have been known to be dangerous in the past, so if there was one lurking around this cave still, you wouldn't want to get on its bad side.
Coming in at 5, Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. In Limerick City stands an impressive piece of stonework by the name of Thurmond Bridge, which spans the dark waters of the River Shannon. The bridge was built back in 1836 by a pair of designers named James and George Payne, and according to rumours, their last name would set the tone of future happenings for years to come. The story surrounding the bridge is that of Drunken Thady and the Bishop's Lady. Thady was the local troublemonger in Sloven, and the lady was the wife of the Bishop of Limerick. However, unbeknownst to her husband, she enjoyed a life of vice when the sun went down. One night, while both women were out and about on the bridge, they crossed paths with one another and began to fight, as you do. The Bishop's Lady attempted to push Thady into the river below. However, when she attempted to beg God to forgive her wicked ways and spare her life, the push was unsuccessful. The struggle only ended when the Bishop's Lady fell into the water instead and quickly drowned. Now, there are many who say the furious spirit of the Bishop's Lady haunts the Thurmond Bridge, ready to pull late night walkers into the water below. However, don't fret, because apparently the Bishop Lady's fingerprints will appear on the stone side of the bridge before she pulls you below, so you have time to run. If you see fingers, run. Not all fingers are good fingers. Coming in at 4, the patron of Gravediggers Pub. The Gravediggers Pub has been standing since 1833 and is named for its original owner, John Kavanagh, who fathered 25 children and has a handful of descendants still alive today. And now the pub is in Glasnevin, which is also known for its cemeteries, both Glasnevin Cemetery and Prospect Cemetery, which lies directly beside the pub, in turn giving it its nickname. Due to this, one long-standing tradition is for patrons to order a pint by shoveling a scoop of graveyard dirt against the outside wall of the pub. So, as you would expect, with the pub being so close to the cemetery, it gets a handful of guests that aren't on the same plane as us. One of the pub's most well-known customers is regarded very fondly by the living regulars. The spirit takes the form of an older gentleman in vintage tweed and has been known to appear in the corner of the bar, quietly enjoying a Guinness until he finishes his pint and vanishes from sight. The staff actually encourage those who see him to buy him a pint for the road. In my opinion, they're just trying to take your cash. Coming in at 3, the Sacrificial Beggar Child. This Swedish legend goes that there was a town called Daland that was inflicted by disease that was wiping out a lot of the population and resulting in many residents fleeing. The townspeople were beside themselves until one day a man from Finland came along with advice on how to stop the disease. He told them that only a sacrifice would put an end to the misery, and explained that they would need to bury a living thing in the ground. The villagers were desperate, so they took his his advice. They began the process by burying a rooster alive in the ground, but the act failed to produce any results, so instead they decided to bury an entire goat. However, this also failed. Feeling that they had no other options left, they decided the only sacrifice worthy enough to end the disease would be an actual human being. They set their sights on an orphan boy and offered him bread as bait, which he fell for before dropping into a prepared hole. The villagers began to bury the hapless child, who was absolutely terrified and pled with them for mercy, but they continued on. Before long, the deed had been done and the child was left to die. However, some villagers claimed they could hear his cries from beneath the ground, begging for them to release him. Coming in at number 2, the Christmas Ghosts. This legend begins with a woman preparing to head to midnight Christmas mass. In order for her and her friend to make it on time, they agreed to wake the other and head out at the same time. Late at night, she thought she heard her friend telling her it was time to leave, so she grabbed some bread that she had baked for later and head out. While en route, she stumbled across 2 witches who wished to murder her on the spot. However, they couldn't harm her because of the cross in her pocket. She didn't think much of it and proceeded to the church, heading quickly inside. As she was sitting, she heard something that utterly terrified her, a voice that told her that she could be killed on the spot, but would be spared because the speaker was her godfather. The voice made it clear that she was in terrible danger. She looked around and quickly realized all of the people gathered in the church were headless. She ran, only to be accosted by a ghostly parishioner, who attempted to grab her by the veil. She escaped, but upon her return she saw the remains of her veil that had been seized by the ghosts, ripped into tiny pieces and distributed amongst the graves that were outside the church, her mind instantly imagining what could have been if the ghost had grabbed her instead of the veil. And finally, coming in at number 1, Chupacabra. This legend tells the tale of a very evil woman named Chupacabra, who was so despicable she apparently knew the devil himself. They were on first name basis, and she was so nasty that even he sometimes feared her. The devil had been attempting to spread discord between a married couple but had failed, resulting in Kitta mocking him, saying that she could easily complete the deed herself. So she did just that, with the devil's encouragement, even promising her a beautiful pair of shoes if she were to succeed. Kitta first went to the wife, informing her that her husband was a wonderful man, but there was evil in his heart. She claimed she needed to shave her husband under his chin to remove the last of the wickedness that resided in him. The woman agreed, believing this would do good. Kitta next went to the husband, where she praised their marriage and the man's wife, but told him that his wife planned to cut his throat. Straight up savagery. He didn't believe it, but became a little paranoid, so one evening while in bed he pretended to be asleep, during which time his wife attempted to carry out her plan of shaving his chin. Her husband of course believed she was trying to kill him. Now don't fret, they didn't kill each other, but it did create the discord the devil was so hoping for, and Chupacabra ended up earning herself a brand new pair of shoes. Good on you, kid. In at 5, the Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob. Now this legend comes to us from Marion, Kentucky, where a young girl is said to be buried in a concrete grave. Back in 1916, a woman named Mary Louise Ford and her 5-year-old daughter Mary Ellen Ford were living in Pilot's Knob. The mother and daughter were accused of being witches, and instead of waiting for the trial, the frightened villagers dragged the mother and daughter out of the house and burned them alive at the stake. Classic witch business. They then buried the mother's body in a different location, and to avoid the young girl coming back from the dead and seeking revenge, the fearful villagers made sure to take precautions. They buried the daughter in Pilot's Knob in a steel reinforced coffin, and then after lowering it into the grave they filled it with concrete. Following that, they put gravel on top and built a metal fence all around the gravesite. Yeah, they were pretty damn scared. According to legend, the young girl's ghost paces back and forth behind the fence, searching for her mother who was buried somewhere else. Yet she cannot escape the confines of the fence. Many locals have even reported seeing tiny child's footprints in the gravel over her grave, and some believe that if you visit the girl's grave alone and get too close, her hands will come up and grab a hold of you and drag you down into the concrete. Folks who have reported to see her go say that she wears a white dress that is scorched at the bottom and her long blonde hair smolders at the ends. In at 4, the Hanging Man of Allendale Train Tunnel. The Allendale Train Tunnel is located south of Cincinnati in the woods behind the Allendale Trailer Park in Ellesmere, Kentucky. Now, legend goes that some years ago a man hung himself from a hook that is set above the tunnel entrance. The man's ghost is said to walk the tunnel or even appear hanging from the hook. Not only that, but there are also reports of disembodied voices as well as screams coming from inside the tunnel. Now for those seeking to locate the tunnel, there has been some confusion simply because it's known as a train tunnel yet no trains run through it. It's actually a tunnel for the stream that runs under the tracks. In order to reach it, you must enter the woods, travel down a hill and follow the stream to reach the tunnel, which is now heavily graffitied and littered. Although in urban legend, one element rings true. There is a hook above the entrance to the tunnel, the clear indicator that you're in the right place. Enjoy. In at number 3 we have the Ghost of the Grey Lady and Longleat House. Longleat House is an English stately home and the seat of the Marquis of Bath. The house was originally built by Sir John Tyne and was designed mainly by Robert Smithson after Longleat Priory was destroyed by fire in 1567. It took almost 12 years to complete and is often regarded as one of the finest examples of Elizabethan architecture in Britain. Sounds magical, right? Well, it has a dark side, one of deceit and murder. It all began back in 1733 when Lady Louisa married Viscount Weymouth, who owned the Longleat estate. Louisa moved into the home with him, bringing with her a number of her own servants. It was said that she was fond of one of her footmen, who she described as loyal and true. Now, this favoritism wasn't taken well among the other servants, and out of jealousy they told Viscount Weymouth that the footman was having an affair with Louisa, which of course wasn't true. Now this is where the story gets a little blurry. Some say Weymouth paid someone to push the footman down the stairs, while others say he did it himself. Either way, the footman broke his neck and his body was buried in the cellar. This took a toll on Lady Louisa, who developed pneumonia, which resulted in her death at the young age of 22. According to visitors of Longleat House, you can find a lady dressed in grey creeping along the house's corridors, especially close to the library where the footman died. Coming in at number 2 we have the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is a phantom cat purported to live in Cornwall, England. The creature is said to be panther-like and black-furred, with it stalking around Bodmin Moor killing livestock. Sightings of the beast were reported back in 1978 after mutilated slain livestock were found in the area. Some people propose that the beast had escaped from a zoo, and as it was illegal to own one privately, the former owner could not report it to the police. It has been claimed that animal trainer Mary Chipperfield had released 3 pumas into the wild following the closure of her Plymouth Zoo in 1978, and perhaps this is what gave rise to rumours of the beast. Jumping forward to 1995, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food conducted an official investigation, with there being no verifiable evidence of exotic felines loose in Britain, and that instead the livestock could have been killed by indigenous species. However, less than a week after the government report, a boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull, measuring about 4 inches long by 7 inches wide. The skull was lacking its lower jaw, but possessed 3 sharp, prominent canines that suggest it may have been a leopard. It was immediately sent to the Natural History Museum in London for verification, with them determining that it was a genuine skull from a young male leopard. And finally, in at number 1 we have Spring-Heeled Jack. Originating from Victoria-era Britain, Spring-Heeled Jack is a character from urban legend that was first supposedly sighted back in 1837. However, over the years more frequent tales have emerged. His name is said to come from his ability to leap over great distances and heights. Not too shabby. The very first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack came in October of 1837, when a woman named Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill when a tall-coated man leapt from the building into the street. He then grabbed her with his metal claws and kissed her before tearing at her clothes. After her screams were heard, he fled the scene, leaping back into the building he came from. Following the encounter, more accounts occurred, with the most notable being the Alsop case. The Alsop case was one of the most widespread stories about Jack, with it being published in several newspapers. Jane Alsop recalls the moments when she was attacked, stating, "I answered the door of my father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, who told me to bring a light, claiming, 'We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane.' I brought the person a candle and noticed that he wore a large cloak. The moment I had handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth while his eyes resembled red balls of fire. She also reported that he wore a large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared tight-fitting, resembled white oilskin. No one was ever caught and identified as Spring-Heeled Jack, which of course led to numerous theories of his nature and identity. Skeptical investigators have dismissed these stories though and claim Spring-Heeled Jack is a product of mass hysteria, which developed around various stories of a boogeyman and devil. Coming in at 5, Arkansas the Dog Boy. Now the name may sound ridiculous, yes, but the story is truly chilling. If you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of a small Arkansas town of Quintman, you may very well encounter the hulking outline of a 300-pound, half-man, half beast with glowing animal eyes. This is the Dog Boy. If you see him, walk quickly, as he is rumored to chase people down the street, biting at their heels, just like a dog. Now, this legend is rare, because the story behind the story may just be even creepier than the legend itself. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was reportedly a problem child, but not a cute one. No, this kid collected and tortured animals before turning his sociopathic focus to his parents, supposedly imprisoning them in their home and murdering his father. Bettis was eventually imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would later die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Spooky stuff. Coming in at 4, Colorado, Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to their knees. Riverdale Road is notorious for having some of the most chilling and endless ghost stories, beginning with the fact that it is literally referred to as the gates to hell. Yeah, now the gates themselves are simply made of rusty iron, yet people travel from far and wide to visit them. This is because the man who built the gates lost his mind once they were finished. He then burned his entire mansion with his family asleep inside. Worse still, he was never caught or put on trial. As of now, people report that a lady in white walks the road close by the gates, with many assuming she is the man's wife, wandering, searching for her murdered children or even her husband. Another ghostly story goes that there are accidents that specifically happen to joggers all the time. Once upon a time, a jogger decided to take a jog along Riverdale Road and ultimately got hit. They sadly passed away, and rumor has it their spirit now haunts the road. People who walk the road are said to have heard a loud heartbeat and footsteps. If you drive by, you might also feel something hitting your car when there's literally nothing there. Now, there are so many more stories, but we'll end with the Native American shapeshifters. Now, what makes Riverdale Road interesting isn't just the road itself, but because the area of land that it cuts through is also rumored to be haunted. For hundreds of years, there have been countless stories about Native American shapeshifters roaming the land, with many passers-by spotting them on the road. According to reports, they take on different shapes and communicate with people in their own ways. They're also known to play tricks on anyone who walks down Riverdale Road, so be warned.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the Mazzarol. Speaking of non-human entities, let's take a quick trip to the mountains. The Italian Dolomites, to be specific. No relation to the comedian turned movie star recently played by Eddie Murphy. This mountain range sits stoutly in northeastern Italy and is full of legends and secrets. Plenty of cryptids and creatures are said to roam these mysterious mountains, from fairies to wizards and witches to mythical royalty. But the creature that piques my interest the most is the Mazzarol. In the valleys of Belluno province, this myth is still well known and widespread. This tiny playful creature resembles a gnome, so make sure you tag your friends and let them know they've been gnomed. Whew! Now that I've made my requisite meme reference for the day, I can get to the actual details. This tiny, cap-wearing dude dressed in red wanders around the woods. For him to simply wander would be kind of boring though, so of course there's some darkness to this myth. He loves to find folks traveling around dusk and then lead them astray. Anyone who treads on top of his footprints is compelled by forces unknown to follow them all the way back to the no man's cave, after which they will forget everything about themselves. Many a tourist has fallen victim to the Mazzarol's mean-spirited trickery. Some legends even say that the Mazzarol will abduct the occasional individual and make them his slave. The story goes that the gnome managed to steal a young woman away from her village and put her to work. He was kind during this time and taught her many skills: cheese making, butter churning, and more. He even promised to teach her how to extract wax from whey. However, he was never able to complete this final task, as one day a hunter stumbled upon the missing girl and brought her back home. A remedy made from goat's milk brought her memory back, and the girl, overwhelmed with gratitude, taught the villagers how to make cheese and butter. To this day though, nobody has figured out how to extract wax from whey. Maybe someone will seek out the Mazzarol and find out though. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Witches of Montamatana. More mountainous mythical monsters are waiting for you. If you make your way out to Montamatana, you will find world-class hiking and some unexpected extracurriculars. That's right, you can go witch hunting. Years ago, it was said that this mountain was a popular spot for witches to perform rituals and human sacrifices. They practiced their magics up on the crags and cliffs and amassed great fortunes. Reincarnations of these witches are said to return often in search of their material wealth from past lifetimes. The reality of this wealth is often called into question, but that doesn't stop treasure seekers from braving the range. Some of these booty seekers say they've encountered violent witches willing to slit their throats, but have somehow made it out alive. Maybe other proverbial pirates didn't make it out so well. Either way, Montematana is well known for magic, and you'd probably be best off if you just avoided making the perilous journey at night, unless you'd like to run into some witches, and in that case I'll reserve judgment. And finally, at number 1, we've got Poveglia Island. This tiny island about a half-mile from Venice has been shut off from the public for years. Some call it the Plague Island. Why? Well, I'll get to explaining. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, this fortified island was used as a quarantine station. Over 160,000 infected folks were brought here to live out their last painful days away from the healthier portion of the population. Many mass graves have been discovered nearby over the years, proving how unfortunate anyone who paid Poveglia a visit really was. Napoleon stored weapons on this island as well, and when it was discovered, many small battles were waged. This, of course, added to the island's body count. Even later on, a mental hospital was built on the island. Legends say that one of the doctors in charge would treat his patients horribly, often torturing them and tossing them from the bell tower. With all these horrifying historic events taking place on the island, it's no wonder that folks think it's haunted. In fact, there's absolutely zero public access to this island. The folks in charge have deemed it too dangerous to visit. Venturing out to Poveglia is literally illegal. What could they be hiding out there?
In at 5, La Ciguapa. This is a mythological creature that is commonly described as having human female form with brown or dark blue skin, backward facing feet, and very long, smooth hair that covers the body. According to folklore, it is a hypnotic creature that lurks in the Highland Mountains and deep forests of the island, waiting for the perfect moment to lure men into the woods and make them disappear. Classic. Some people believe that the Ciguapa bring death, and it is said you should not look them in the eye, otherwise you will be at risk of becoming permanently bewitched. They are considered to be magical beings, beautiful in appearance to some but horrendous to others. They are deceitful and hell-bent on capturing a wayward traveller. Now some legends suggest that not all are evil and do not wish to kill, though much evidence supports the benevolent claim. Law states that the only way to truly capture a Ciguapa is by tracking them at night during a full moon, with a black and white polydactylic dog. The Ciguapa also has a similar one-legged version from Colombia, called La Patasolo, who shapeshifts into a skull horse head. Lovely. In at 4, El Sombreron. El Sombreron is a famous legend told in books and film, and is also a boogeyman figure throughout Spanish culture. The figure is known by other names like Cipitio, the Goblin, and Sizimite. However, his characteristics are always the same: a short man with a black dress, a thick belt, a large black hat, and boots that make a lot of noise when he walks. He is said to ride horses and braid their tails in manes. So sweet, I think. When he cannot find a horse, he will hunt down a dog to braid instead. Now the legend goes that in the neighborhood of La Recolosi lived a woman named Susanna, the daughter of a woman who owned a store. She was known to be pretty with long hair and blue hazelnut eyes. One night when there was a full moon, she was on her balcony admiring the sky when suddenly a short man appeared wearing a big hat and holding a guitar. The girl's beauty had amazed him. He sang her a song, however her parents quickly made her come inside. Since that day she had not been able to sleep because she still hears the man with the guitar. She has not been able to eat because when her food is served it is contaminated with soil. Her worried parents took the young girl to a priest in order to rid her of the entity. A few days later, El Sombreron disappeared for good. Coming in at 3, New Jersey, The Watcher. Now this legend could honestly be the script for a horror movie. Let me break it down for you. A family begin receiving ominous notes just days after they close on their dream home. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, this story took off back in 2015 after a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. However, they began to get letters signed by someone only IDing themselves as the Watcher, who claimed it was their duty to watch over the house, while also spouting weird lines such as, I quote, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested?" and "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" Yeah, creepy. The writer also noted the make of the couple's car and the comings and goings of construction crews. He also observed that the couple had 3 young children, stating, I quote, "Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Now, no one quite knows the truth behind the legend, whether it was a prank or a spooky neighbour, but what we do know is that the watcher was never caught, and still remains watching the house in Westfield, New Jersey. Coming in at number 2, California Turnbull Canyon. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop trail located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. It lies in the northern central part of the preserve and is an east-west canyon with relatively steep drainage. Now natives call Turnbull Canyon Hatunga, or the place of the devil, and is supposedly where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk along the canyon. According to other reports, Turnbull Canyon also houses the ghosts of 21 children who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. However, there are no existing records of the incident, so this may be local legend. However, what we do know is real is that in the canyon lies the remains of an old insane asylum that supposedly came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s via long dormant electrical wire. Not only that, but there are cults, alien encounters, and gravity hills. The list goes on and on. Basically, if something unnerves you, there is probably a story about it going down at Turnbull Canyon. Now, its origin is pretty simple. Turnbull's evil dates back centuries. However, it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started to get a little odd, and very quickly word of the canyon's evil terror spread far and wide, making it one of the world's most visited places. But not for its beauty, but due to morbid curiosity. And finally, coming in at number 1, Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. This terrifying urban legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but very quickly spread through the Washington, D.C. area as well. Now, like all legends, there are many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or a hatchet. Now, the legend goes that in 1904, a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia to a nearby prison. En route, however, one of the buses crashed and the convicts managed to escape. Thankfully though, the police were able to round up all of them, all but one. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. Legend has it that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Jump ahead to 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe and wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Terrifying. A few other people also reported that the man in the suit threw an axe at them for trespassing near the bridge. To this day, there have been numerous reportings of the man with the axe, as well as the dead rabbits in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, which is now known, once again, as the Bunny Man Bridge. Now, versions of the legend have varied over the years, particularly in the Bunny Man's name, motives, weapons, victims, and description, with some accounts stating that victims were mutilated and others that the Bunny Man is a ghost. However, that aside, the legend is absolutely horrifying and has prevented a lot of Virginia locals from wandering too close to the bridge.
Coming in at number 5, we've got water blades. While this may be a tale told around the world, it seems to have a strong presence in Italy. Sure, the name sounds cool, maybe even conjuring up some images of wicked aquatic swords, but the reality of water blades is horrific. In fact, if you really like water parks, you might want to skip this entry altogether. I don't want to just ruin them forever for you. We've all heard of razor blades and other assorted sharp objects showing up where they shouldn't. Halloween candy, playground equipment, door handles, and more. But those are all relatively controllable once you've realized the present danger. Water blades, on the other hand, will rip and tear until there's nothing left. The urban legend floating around around implies that some folks have been fastening razor blades to parts of water slides at popular theme parks in Italy. You can imagine what might happen if someone went slip sliding down one of these horrible traps. Maim is an understatement in cases like these. Thankfully, this urban legend seems to be staunchly set in the false category. For something that purportedly happens quite often, reports of such activity are very rare. The actual affliction of rapidly descending individuals doesn't seem to happen. Still, the legend must be very effective, especially because it seems to get told so often. I suppose the lesson to be learned from this one is be careful using public facilities. Good advice, especially in these days and times. Coming in at number 4, we've got Pier Zanfreda's Alien Encounters. Everyone knows a friend of a friend who claims to have been abducted by aliens, and if not abducted, then maybe they saw a UFO or something. But this Italian security guard has a claim to fame so out there it might as well be in outer space. He says that he was abducted by aliens 5 times over the course of 3 years. All abductions happened in Genoa, all apparently while he was still working the night shift. Skeptics, as skeptics do, dismiss these claims, but apparently he's given details of each abduction while under the influence of truth serum. Pretty astronomical, don't you think? The very first abduction occurred late one night. Zanfreda was patrolling and saw what appeared to be 4 lights. After seeing this, the engine, lights, and radio went out in his patrol car. Thinking, as most security guards should, that there might be thieves about, he ran over to investigate. He did not discover a group of miscreants though. No, he found himself face to face with some extraterrestrial life. A UFO was floating above and he was abducted by these outer space dwelling individuals. While approaching the so-called scene of the crime, Zanfreda was grabbed from behind. When he turned around, he saw a creature he could only describe as an enormous, green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though he were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic, no less than 10 feet tall. This, of course, was only the beginning of Zanfreda's galactic incidents. He's run into interplanetary assailants again and again, sometimes even when he had backup. Following some encounters, special investigators were called in. They discovered distinct markings on the ground that didn't seem of human origin, but nobody but Zanfreda has laid eyes on the creatures themselves. His claims have intensified the belief of an alien presence near Genoa and has made a bit of a celebrity out of the now elderly security guard. His last abduction took place in 1980 while he was under close observation. These days, he claims that the aliens contact him directly, communicating with questionable motivation. So if you're at all interested in close encounters with the third kind, Genoa might be the place to be.
In at 3, Duende. Duende is a creature from Spanish folklore that has been conceptualized as a mischievous spirit inhabiting a house, often living inside the bedroom walls of young children. They are even known to clip the toenails of unkempt children, often leading to the mistaken removal of an entire toe. Yeah. No fun at all. Now, beliefs about duendes vary from region to region, but some say that they are the souls of infants who died before they could be baptized, whereas others simply portray them as naughty spirits that hide in a person's home and wreak havoc. Duendes became so legendary in Spain that in the 16th century there was even a law that said that anyone who moved into a home only to later realize it was infested with duendes were free to abandon it. Yeah. That's intense. No matter what, most stories about the duende seem to have a special relationship to children, most likely because parents used them as a tactic to scare their kids into doing things. Otherwise, the duendes were coming to kidnap them or even eat them if you don't clean your room, eat your dinner, bathe, etc. Coming in at number 2, La Llorona. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman or the Crier, is one of the most famous legends not just in Spanish culture but across the world. This lore states that a woman was abandoned by her husband and was left alone to raise her 2 children. The woman was devastated, so she drowned the boys in a river out of grief and rage. As a result, the woman was condemned to wander for all eternity until she finds the bodies of her children, often causing death and misfortune to those near her. Now, according to the legend, in a rural village lived a young woman named Maria. She came from a poor family but was known around her village for her beauty. One day, a wealthy nobleman came to the village, who stopped in his tracks when he saw Maria. He proposed to her and she immediately accepted. The 2 wed and had 2 sons together. However, the husband was always traveling, and when he came home he only paid attention to the children. And as time passed, Maria could tell he was falling out of love with her. She was right, because one day he returned to the village with a younger woman and bid his children farewell. Now this is when Maria drowned her 2 children in blind rage. However, once she realized what she had done, she searched the river for them, but they had already been swept away. Days later, she was found dead on the river bed, having committed the two ultimate sins, murder and suicide. Her spirit now haunts the land of the living and the dead, weeping for her children, earning the name La Llorona. She kidnaps wandering children at night, mistaking them for her own, while begging the heavens for forgiveness, while drowning the children she kidnaps. Folks who have claimed to have seen her say she appears at night by rivers or lakes wearing a white or black gown with a veil, and others say that if you hear the cries of La Llorona, you are marked for death. Spooky. There was also a film, I watched it recently. It was utter trash, so hopefully the legend's creepier. Finally coming in at number 1, El Coco. The Coco, also known as the Cuco, Coca, or Cuca, is a mythical ghost monster equivalent to the boogeyman, found in Hispanophone and Lusophone countries. In Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, the legend goes that parents will often invoke the Coco, or Cuca, as a way of discouraging their children from misbehaving. They sing them lullabies or tell frightening rhymes which warn their children of El Coco. If they misbehave or don't obey, El Coco will come and get them, and then eat them. Classic. El Coco is a child eater and a kidnapper. It may devour the child immediately and leave no trace, or it may take the child away to a place of no return. However, it only does that to disobedient children. El Coco is known to lurk on rooftops, on the lookout for misbehaving children. It takes the shape of dark shadows and represents the opposite of a guardian angel, with the El Coco frequently compared to the devil. Now, one of the oldest known rhymes about the Coco originated from the 17th century and went like this, I quote, "Sleep child, sleep now, else Coco comes and will eat you." I mean, straight to the point really, I respect that. Now you could easily draw comparisons between El Coco and the boogeyman, however unlike the boogeyman, Latino parents use Coco to drive the fear of God into their children. Now another legend has it that El Coco is Francisco Ortega. At the beginning of the 20th century, Ortega was so desperate to find a cure for his tuberculosis that he visited a curandera. He was told to drink the blood of children, so he kidnapped a 7-year-old boy named Bernardo. However, I have my doubts about this considering the original Coco rhyme predates the Ortega legend. What do you guys think though?